Once again, you're all very welcome to this session to discuss the ADMIRE MSCA, the Marie Skłodowski-Curie Action COFUND in Advanced Materials Research as part of an MSCA COFUND postdoctoral fellowship. Today's presentation, I'm going to talk about some of the, we'll call it the logistical and structural elements of the process and the application process, and Richard in a couple of minutes is going to go through some of the details of the ADMIRE Centre itself to give you some context and background, predominantly on the makeup of the centre and the research themes. So in a nutshell, what is ADMIRE? It is one of these Marie Curie, which is it's a very prestigious award, one of the flagship research awards for the European Commission. It funds programs at all levels, postgrad and postdoc. So as a co-fund, we get 50% of the money from the European Commission, and the other 50% of the funds come through Science Foundation Ireland and the AMBER Research Portfolio. The ADMIRE fellowships, of which 12 will be awarded across 2 calls, will be for 24 months in each case, and it'll be fully funded. And we'll talk about the full funding now in a few minutes. We expect that there will be 6 fellowships awarded in the first call and 6 in the second call, but that may depend on the total number of applications. As with all MSCAs, the overall objective is to support the next generation of research leaders in any given field. In this particular case, ADMIRE is linked very closely with AMBER, so that's in the area of advanced materials science in Europe. This is done by facilitating high quality research and also providing the development of soft skills that would be very important for a future chosen career. I think anyone who's familiar with MSCAs, particularly at the PhD level, will probably be very familiar with the idea of the T-shaped candidate, a broad spectrum knowledge and an understanding of where your research fits into the global picture of research, combined with deep and specific training and ultimately knowledge. And again, an MSCA at any level looks to support that. Very quickly, but we will return to this, the key dates. So just to note that this is the first of 2 calls that will be launched this year. The call at the moment is open. It was launched on the 1st of December and will run until the 1st of March. At that point, we go through some logistical eligibility checks. We'll talk about the eligibility in a little while. The remote review process will take place over March and April. Successful candidates will be notified on or about the 18th of April, sometime in the middle of April, or shortly after that about an interview. The interviews will take place, and ultimately a decision and proposal of award will be made in sort of early June of 2021, with an expectation that the fellows would start work with AMBER and ADMIRE sometime in Q3 of 2021. Acknowledging that there may be some limitations around COVID and certain mobility issues, but we'll work those out. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Richard to talk through AMBER and the linkages with the ADMIRE research teams. There is substantial overlap. You can see the 5 areas that the ADMIRE postdoctoral fellows are being accepted under, and they link very, very closely with the broader remit of AMBER.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So, like Ed says, these are the ADMIRE research themes. So we've 5 quite broad areas, all in the field of advanced materials, but then there are materials for specific application fields. So materials for ICT, materials for energy, materials for health, engineered functional materials, and the final one is sustainable materials and technologies. So what we wanted to do is to, first of all, give a bit of background to the AMBER Centre itself. For a few reasons. One, so you understand the environment that you're applying to work in. Also, if you're still developing your ideas and your concepts for the proposals. I'll give some ideas about current work that's happening in AMBER, and you might be able to see where your research fits into what we're already doing. And thirdly, when Ed comes along to talk about the evaluation criteria later on, you'll see that alignment with AMBER's mission is included in those evaluation sub-criteria. So it's important to understand what AMBER's mission is within Ireland so that you can include those kind of aspects into your proposal. So what is AMBER? AMBER is a research centre that's funded by the main Science Foundation Ireland funding body in Ireland, which is a national foundation, and it invests in all kinds of research from very fundamental blue sky activity through to applied research. And it's a funding mechanism, so it's an amount of funding that's awarded to Trinity College Dublin, which is based in the capital of Ireland, Dublin. But then Trinity acts as a lead for AMBER, and it distributes the money to partner institutes across Ireland. So AMBER has principal investigators and research projects active in many of the higher education institutes and technological institutes across Ireland. So it's a distributed research centre. These centres they're designed to be outward facing, so they're meant to be there to engage with industry and to engage with society, and therefore they have targets on collaborating with industry, and they have targets on generating more funding in addition to the core funding that they're already receiving from the national agency. And they also have plenty of targets on developing publications, proceedings, presentations, innovation activities, things like patents and spin-outs, and also engaging with society in different ways like education and outreach. So AMBER is the Centre for Advanced Materials in Bioengineering. You will find in Ireland that there's 15 other SFI centres, all with different remits in different technological either application fields or scientific fields that they're based around. So the way AMBER is structured is everything is divided into projects, and those projects are grouped into themes. But we do encourage links between the themes and between the projects, both within the AMBER Centre and also outside. So it's a very interdisciplinary environment, and it's a very intersectoral environment. There's lots of activity that goes on between research and commercial and industrial enterprise. Each of the projects then is a team of researchers, and each of the projects will be led by a principal investigator. So when you're applying to the ADMIRE program, your project, if it's approved, will fit within one of these themes, and it may be aligned with a particular group of platform projects or fundamental research projects, and it may be linked with a set of industry projects as well, depending on where it lies. But then the nice thing about AMBER is it has its own operations and support team. So it has a project management team, it has an education and outreach team, it has a commercial team that will help the fellows engage with industry, and everybody is there to support our researchers as they pursue their projects. It does have some of the best facilities for advanced materials research in, I'd say, in Europe, if not the world. And it brings together all the infrastructure in Ireland that is related to materials research. So I'll highlight a couple of things. The Advanced Microscopy Lab has everything from EDX to SEM to helium ion microscopy, some very advanced tools, all based in a specialist building in the centre of Dublin. We have a photonics lab, we have a lot of polymer processing facilities, we have a small clean room, which many industry partners come in to do work that they wouldn't be able to do in their own clean rooms, so they take advantage of the fact that we're an academic institute, but we have our own quite flexible clean room facility. And then we are linked with the Trinity Centre for Bioengineering, and a major group within AMBER is the Tissue Engineering Research Group in the Royal College of Surgeons. I skipped the additive manufacturing laboratory there because that's the most recent thing, so it gets its own slide. So we have a whole range of new 3D printing equipment and infrastructure, and all of this is designed to allow us to develop new materials and new additive technologies that can be used in the latest generation of 3D printing. So our focus is still on materials, but we have a whole load of equipment and processing infrastructure to back that up. And that's the AR lab. So I have a few slides on current activity, like I say, to give you ideas for where your projects may fit in or may complement current activity. So I wouldn't restrict your ideas to these, but it gives you a quick rundown of what's going on at the moment. So in ICT, we're looking at devices above CMOS, so looking at going to very small scale semiconductor devices, anything that can reduce the energy cost, a lot of activity in magnetics and photonics and advanced magnetic materials. Self-assembly is a big activity, so we're looking at block copolymers and forming patterns that can be used at very, very small scale, nanoscale, and anything to do with novel materials, particularly in magnetics and devices. Strong links with Intel in Ireland, strong links with other ICT industry in Ireland as well. Materials for energy. So here we're applying a lot of the particularly 2D and 1D materials that have been developed by our PIs and applying them for energy applications. So battery and ICT based applications, anything that replaces lithium. We have a lot of materials for energy storage and conversion, so artificial photosynthesis materials. And this is very closely integrated with the activity that's been going on in the magnetic materials that we saw previously in the ICT slides. So a lot of high performing magnets for energy and different innovative materials for energy storage and conversion. Health then is a big area, and it's a very active industrial and innovative area for Ireland. We have a lot of the world's leading health and bio companies have their EMEA innovation bases in Ireland. So we have a lot of work on tissue regeneration, and that's bringing the materials into tissue that we then build into human structures that can be put into the body. So scaffolds and bioinks, anything that can be printed into something that can be then used as, say, a replacement nerve or a replacement tissue for the body. And then using these tissues to deliver some therapeutics into the body. So a lot of really interesting stuff going on there. Very linked to the 3D printing stuff that I showed you a minute ago. Engineered functional materials covers everything else that is to do with layering and making functional surfaces and functional structures that can be used for a whole range of applications. So that includes membranes, includes sensors, includes TFTs, and a lot of functional pattern surfaces using biopolymers. And you can see how that relies on the advanced manufacturing and additive manufacturing facilities that I showed you on the earlier slides. And the last one is our newest theme, and that's sustainable materials. And really this has come about because of the demand from industry for work in this area. So we get approached by a lot of companies who say we have materials value chains that they want to turn into either something circular or something that has elements of recycling or reuse within them. So we look at the materials and we look for sustainable replacements, or we look at ways to reuse or compatibilize materials for different recycling routes. That's very quick. If you've got any questions on any of those fields or like specific technical questions, you can come to the ADMIRE team, or you can approach one of the individual principal investigators directly. So just a quick slide on recent successes. So I mentioned scaffolds for tissues. So we had the first human trials of scaffolds for bone regeneration. We have many PIs who have received ERC awards, which is obviously very prestigious. We have a couple of FET Open Awards, which is very prestigious blue sky research going on in Amber. And then we have some really good links with major innovative companies in Ireland, such as Intel, Nokia, Johnson & Johnson. I mentioned there that our host institutes are spread across Ireland. So if you're not familiar with the geography of Ireland, Dublin is there on the east coast, and it's the capital, and around a quarter of the Irish population live in Dublin. And around a quarter of our institutes there as well. So Trinity, UCD, DCU RCSI, they're all based in Dublin. But we do have available supervisors who are working in Athlone, who are working in Galway, and who are working down in the south in Cork, which are all great places to live in their own right. The distances involved, it's about 200 kilometres from across Ireland and a little bit further down to Cork. So it's not too far away, but we are spread out across Ireland. And there, I'm going to hand back to Ed to carry on with talking about the programme itself.
Thank you very much, Richard. So the next part of this talk is going to be around the logistics associated with the application process. Just to make sure that everyone is very clear, all of the details that we're going to discuss here are available in the guide to applicants. So please do pay very close attention to that document. We will, as we point out here, mirror many of the standard European Commission rules and regulations around the evaluation and award of fellowships. So you can also reference or look at the documentation from the European Commission around Marie Skłodowski-Curie actions, and all of those links are given at the end of this presentation. To begin with, we just wanted to point out that there are a couple of, I suppose, fundamental differences between a standard Marie Curie individual fellowship and a co-fund. So you'll see that the individual fellowships are bottom up. They are in any field, any supervisor, any host, and it's entirely at the discretion of the proposed candidate, the fellow, to go and propose a project and work with any supervisor that they would like to. The ADMIRE fellowships, as being co-funded, are slightly more constrained. Obviously, it has to align with the research themes within AMBER, and there is a smaller list of potential supervisors that can act as a mentor for these projects. That list of supervisors is given as an annex to the guide for applicants, and when I went through it, and Richard can correct me, there are 77 names in that list of eligible supervisors. Only supervisors from that list can be approached as supervising one of these ADMIRE co-funds. At the same time, as I said, we will follow all of the rules and regulations as set out by the European Commission and enforced, if you will, by the Research Executive Agency. So the review process is designed to be entirely equitable and independent. As far as possible, please make sure that your proposal doesn't necessarily contain any references to it should be focused on the research as opposed to on the researcher. So try to make it as general and generic in its descriptions of you as possible. We also have an added in interview stage that is not within the standard IF framework, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail a little later on. All of the eligible supervisors, there's the 77 from across the AMBER principal investigators and funded investigators supervisors. And as Richard was saying, the AMBER Centre has its own dedicated project and program management, and somewhat different to a standard MSCA, which would be quite standalone. There is a dedicated management team that I'll be the principal point of contact for that. So you do get some extra benefits as being part of the co-fund structure as opposed to the IF. Very briefly, one of the other things that I wanted to mention here was the idea that MSCAs are very prestigious and very worthwhile. So again, within the guide for applicants, there's a couple of comments about that, and the idea that MSCA fellows tend to have increased citations, there are better publications, they tend to be fast track for professorship roles, things like that. So it is a very prestigious and worthwhile process, and you get all of the benefits of the standard MSCA IF as managed directly by the Commission from one of these co-funds, while also getting additional benefits of being part of the bigger, the wider AMBER organization. You'll see in the top corner there, please see section 4 of the guide for applicants. So everything that I'm going to talk to you about now is in section 4. So please do pay particular attention there. Just to highlight, there are 2 forms of eligibility. It's the eligibility of the candidate themselves, and then the various eligibility checks and processes to do with the proposal and the completion of the application. So we have a cutoff date for this call of the 1st of March, and everything will be benchmarked against that date. That means that your eligibility as an experienced researcher and your mobility eligibility will be benchmarked against March the 1st, 2021. So in order to be an experienced researcher, you must have completed a PhD or have 4 years of equivalent research experience. There are very detailed descriptions within the guide for applicants as to what exactly equivalent experience is. So please do pay very close attention to those specifications. If there are any questions, please do feel free to get in touch. So you must have completed a PhD or have the 4 years research equivalent experience. That's normally benchmarked against the degree that would have ordinarily allowed you to embark on PhD studies. So again, that would depend. In Ireland, that can be your undergrad, but very often it's your master's that is the benchmark. So if you have any questions, do come back and talk to us. In terms of mobility, a big key area for MSCAs, you cannot have been living, working, or carrying out your primary functions in Ireland for more than 12 months in the preceding 36 months before March the 1st, 2021. This is quite strictly enforced and will be checked by the European Commission, not just by us. So that's very important. Again, there are caveats to that: compulsory military service or short visits don't apply, and there are additional specific and special conditions for people that might have refugee status anywhere within Europe or the EEA. In terms of the proposal, you have to submit a complete proposal through the online portal. We'll have a slide with the link for that in a little while. You must complete all of the relevant sections and make sure that they are uploaded correctly and submitted correctly by the closing date. The proposal and interview will all be in English, so no other languages will be accepted. And then just a quick note there that for non-EU and EEA researchers, there's a special provision for a form of fast-tracked visa for the purposes of research under the hosting agreement scheme, and that's managed in Ireland through the IUA. So there is a special fast-tracked process for any form of visa and permission to remain in Ireland upon successful award of the fellowship. So that's something to bear in mind. One of the things that the Commission is always very keen on is that we make sure that you understand what exactly it is that you get out of these positions. So the fellowship is expected to be a 2-year employment contract, fully funded by ADMIRE. It is awarded for a specific purpose, that is to carry out the proposed project. You report to the named supervisor that you've selected, and it's all managed through the Supervisors Institute. So as Richard has pointed out, some of those are outside of Dublin. The salary, and please be very careful, this is only indicative and will depend on your own personal circumstances. The salary includes a living allowance, a mobility allowance, and a family allowance. The living allowance and mobility allowance must be paid to all eligible fellows. The family allowance is only paid to someone who meets the specific criteria. So that is in a recognized relationship with the appropriate paperwork, or who can show that they are responsible for children. A very important point to note there is that it's benchmarked against the beginning of your contract, and as the Commission says, does not evolve over the lifetime of the fellowship. So if those circumstances don't apply to you at the beginning, or if they don't apply at the beginning and then change during the process, you are not entitled to the family allowance after the fact. These are estimated employee gross values. There may be some changes depending on the local working conditions within the relevant institutions, and you will be expected to pay suitable tax, social insurance, etc. out of those. But you can expect an approximate gross annual salary, if you have no dependents, of €49,600 or thereabouts. On top of that, there is a dedicated budget for research costs, including publication costs, to travel to conferences and meetings, and general lab supplies. There's also a centrally managed training program, and there are certain budgets available for the central training program. Again, everyone will be issued with a contract. It will be through their host institution, and it will be affiliated to the ADMIRE Centre. And it's very important to point out that the contract specifies both your duties and responsibilities, as well as your rights and entitlements. And that's something that's very important for the Commission. It's why it has to be a contract. It's why you have to pay into social insurance. You have to be entitled to all of the usual and standard services that any resident or employee in Ireland would get through things like health insurance, hospital access, things like that, as well as employee assistance, normally through the individual institution. Just in case you're interested at this point in learning more, we would always point you to the Euraxis website, and particularly the Euraxis Ireland portal, as well as the citizeninformation.ie, which is an Irish government website on all rights and entitlements for people living and working in Ireland. A key component, as I mentioned earlier on, and it's related to that idea of being the T-shaped candidate, is obviously career development, and it's a big part of MSCA. So all recruited fellows will be expected to develop a personal career development plan very early on within their fellowship. That'll normally be completed within the first month of the fellowship, and it will outline the key career goals, the key research goals. It'll help identify any gaps in existing knowledge and identify paths to filling in those gaps. This is supported by through your primary supervisor, your secondary supervisor, and your any other mentors. And is further supported by the opportunity to take part in intersectoral and interdisciplinary secondments or research visits or work visits to expose you to a broader range of skills and expertise. And as we mentioned, there is that centrally run training program. Many of these come through the ADMIRE Centre and are open to all relevant and eligible researchers. These cover the highly successful Pathways to Funding scheme, which helps junior researchers to learn more about future funding opportunities, the winter schools, and the annual symposia, which bring together all the research activities. And these are aligned with other concurrent programs within ADMIRE and the other partner organizations. So the application process itself, and again, I'll refer you to section 5 of the guide for applicants. All applicants must be submitted online through that portal, the admiremsca.grantplatform.com. And the deadline for applications is the 1st of March 2021 at 6 p.m. GMT or UTC. No late applications can be accepted. There are 5 sections that we'll go through in a little more detail: some general applicant information, a brief project description, the detailed proposal documents themselves, the ethics self-assessment process, which must be completed by everyone, even if the answers to those questions is no, that section doesn't apply, and the eligibility self-assessment that we will also be reviewing and checking to make sure that the experienced researcher eligibility criterion and the mobility eligibility criterion are met. I wanted to go through the different components of the application. The pieces that are on the slide right now are the substantive parts, but just to remind you that there are the other online components that need to be completed as well. The applicant information, the proposal or project description, the self-assessment, and the eligibility self-assessment are all online. You'll see the various sections when you log into the portal. But in terms of the applicant information, we gather some personal details. These are used for project management purposes, and there are some of those details that are then used for metrics reporting back to the commission, particularly around nationalities that have applied and gender balances in the processes. They're not shared beyond the generation of those metrics. The project description will include a title and a short title. You're asked to provide a 300-word abstract. You select one of the relevant topics. You select one of the relevant supervisors. You provide up to 10 keywords to help match your topic, and you make the relevant declarations. The ethics self-assessment is an online form. If you answer yes to any of those questions, you must complete the more detailed ethics statement that we see on this slide. And again, you answer the questions around the eligibility criteria. The substantive part is what's on the slide here, the proposal proper, a 5-page CV. Please pay very close attention to the guides in the Guide for Applicants. These have been taken from the wider European Commission IF call. The main proposal is to cover 3 sections: excellence, impact, and implementation. The templates provide guidance. As with anything, if the information is not there, it cannot be assessed. It will not be assessed. So please make sure that you paid very close attention to the relevant sections and have included all of the relevant details in an appropriate way, following the internal headings, titles, sections, and following the guidance that's provided. The overall proposal, those 3 sections, must not exceed 8 pages. The document itself is to be 10 pages to include a title page and a Gantt chart, but the substantive part of the proposal, those 3 sections, must not exceed 8 pages. Any more than 8 pages will not be reviewed. The reviewers will be instructed to basically stop at page 8. Please also follow the detailed instructions on the format and the details in the CV. If the ethics self-assessment shows that you should complete the ethics statement, a 2-page ethics statement should be uploaded covering the relevant areas. For the self-assessment, and there's a link later on and in the Guide for Applicants, there's a detailed walkthrough guide provided by the European Commission, and we would highly recommend that you use that to walk through the process. They'll give very detailed descriptions of the types of things that might raise ethical concerns. The other thing to note is that there are certain things that the European Commission does not fund, particularly around human embryonic stem cells. So if anything like that ever shows up, even if it might align with other research portfolios, the Commission will not fund it. So please do pay very close attention to any of the exclusions there. The evaluation process, the timelines, we've spoken about this, but just to reiterate, and then we'll go into the specifics of the evaluation process, and some of this will make a bit more sense. Obviously, as soon as the call closes, we start the eligibility checks, going through we'll call them the slightly more pro forma tasks. We then release the applications to the remote experts for their review. And there will be a ranking by those panels. That should be completed by mid-April 2021. At around that same time, suitable eligible candidates will be called to interview. We would expect those interviews to happen sometime between the 26th of April and the 2nd of May. Following the interview process and the generation again of those review reports, there will be ranking. and an offer, which we would hope to be out by early June of 2021, with a view to the proposed candidates, the proposed fellows, joining AMBER by sort of October 2021 or thereabouts. Contract and all that sort of thing sorted. So this is probably the part that everyone is most interested in. How exactly will it be evaluated? This is the remote review. There will be 3 reviewers will examine each of the proposals. They will be asked to score each of those proposals out of across the 3 criteria here. Each criteria will carry 5 marks each. Reviewers are allowed to give scores to 1 decimal place. A minimum threshold of 3.5 out of each category will be required, and both with and without the weighting, that means that there's a threshold of 70%. We don't expect very many people to be down at the threshold. It'll only be the cutoff, but the competition will be quite strong. It'll be a very strong field. These are very prestigious awards, and it can come down to the difference between 0.1 and 0.2 in a final score will ultimately determine which fellow gets awarded the position. So please do make sure that you have looked at this table and make sure that all of those areas are adequately and appropriately addressed and assessed within your proposal. The areas obviously are excellence, the impact of the proposed research, and then the proposed implementation of that work plan. Again, all of these details are given in the guide for applicants, and if you have any questions, you can of course come back and talk to us. We'll mention it briefly. Obviously, it won't apply to absolutely everyone, but the interview process, which is different to the standard IF process, will follow a very similar structure. Again, there are 3 criteria. The reviewers will be asked to give a score out of 5. There will be a minimum threshold of 3.5 in each of those areas. The focus here moves more from the research program, more towards the eligibility of the fit of the candidate to work within the wider AMBER Centre. So you'll see there that under the interview criteria, we look at motivation, research experience and potential for growth, and a convincing implementation and long-term career plan. And again, there are sub-criteria there with guidance on how they might be assessed and how you might address them within the interview at a later stage. Ultimately, what happens is the individual scores from individual reviewers are added together, and an average is given for each of the relevant criteria. The criteria are then weighted according to that criterion weighting that you see at the bottom, and the final score is then presented. So at each stage, a final score will be presented. As long as the candidate has reached the threshold, they would be eligible for funding, and then it will be ranked on highest to lowest. In the case where there is any, I suppose, form of ambiguity within very closely or identically ranked candidates, you can see that there is a priority ordering for each of the evaluation processes, the remote process and the interview process, and there will be a ranking according to that. So that covers off the main logistical elements. Section 7 of the guide includes further links that might help and support you in the writing of your proposal. Other ones that are important to note are, of course, the main Marie Skłodowski-Curie Actions website on the europa.eu website. And again, to point out that mobility is a key element of the Marie Curie Actions. So we direct you again to the Euraccess mobility portal on the European Commission websites. Now, I think the last element is some tips, but what I was going to do was end the presentation element there, and we'll go through the tips as part of the questions and answer session. And I think that both Richard and Claire are going to be able to contribute to that section.